You recording? Yep. Okay, I was starting to do something that I think would be a really useful tutorial for folks. So let's say you have drawn a line drawing of an Augustinolepis, as I have done here. Augustinolepis is California's state dinosaur. This is eventually going to go on our bear flag, and because I think that's cute. So what I've done here is I've created my line drawing. I have a sketch layer down here that I'm going to turn off, and then I have a layer beneath the line drawing for color. I've selected, I don't like this brown, I want to make this sort of a richer looking, maybe a little bit redder brown, just so it's a little bit more pleasing to look at. It doesn't need to be too bright, just a little dusky. And so what I've done here is I've hit G on my keyboard to get the paint bucket tool. Up in my context sensitive menu, I have I've set I'm going to set the tolerance to 10. I'm going to set it to anti-alias, contiguous, all layers. So contiguous means that any area that is reachable, so like as long as it's white, it'll get through. And then all layers means that, I'm on the color layer, but it's going to take the information that's on the line drawing layer and apply that to the paint bucket. So without all layers selected, if I select inside the dinosaur, the whole layer gets filled because there's nothing on the color layer. Let me undo that. If I've got all layers selected and I tap inside the dinosaur, then only the body, the front half of the body gets filled. And let's do the legs also. Now, when I started this, actually, I had, on this color layer, I actually had a gap like that. And let's just talk about that real quick. If I have this gap, you can see there's a clear path inside. You want to think about this as if it were, literally filling this object with liquid color. Because if I click on this now, there's this gap, then the color spills out of that gap and into the rest of the object. So wherever it has the availability to do that, then that's where it'll fill. When I was a little kid, and I mean a little kid, like maybe 4 or 5 years old, on our Commodore 64, we had a drawing tablet and a program called, I think it was called the Dancing Bear, and it was an art program. And there was a paint bucket tool. You would make a drawing and you would color it in using a palette, very much like this. This is one of the reasons that I function sort of as a digital native. I have been doing this basically since I've been able to hold a pen and read. So I was quite young. And when you would use the paint bucket tool in the Dancing Bear, it would literally do an animation of liquid color filling the object. So that is where my understanding of this comes from. Treat this as if you were filling it with a liquid, because you kind of are. So I'm going to fill this up. Here is the reason that we're doing this tutorial today. So you can see that I have filled this up, but if you zoom in, you'll notice that you've got this sort of like crispy white line around the outside, and that's because on your line drawing layer, even if you choose a pretty sharp pen, you've still got this anti-aliasing that happens when you're doing pixel drawings, because when you're this close up, it looks like a little bit of a gradient around the outside, but when you're zoomed out, it makes the line look smoother. So we don't, I want that. If I didn't want that, I would be using a vector program. So now we've got this situation. Well, what do we do with it? Okay, so let's back up a couple of steps here and get rid of all that color. There are a couple of ways that you can handle this. And one of them is up in your context menu. So you're on the paint bucket tool, and up in your context menu, there's this little section called tolerance. And you can slide that around. Like if you click on the word tolerance, you can actually slide it around. And you can see, I usually have mine set to about 10. But what happens if I set it to 100? You can see that that's much smoother. That fill is much cleaner. But if I zoom in, you can still see that there is a certain amount of dithering in it. So playing with tolerance is one way to deal with this. Like I could make this go even further. I have a lot of leeway here when I'm coloring in a black and white drawing, because like black is black and white is white. And so if I make the tolerance like 214, I can end up with a pretty good result. But there's still a better way to do it, because you still end up, you know, some of these more subtle shifts. Whoops. Some of these more subtle shifts, let me grab my hand tool and zoom in further still. Now this is, I will admit, this is a little bit pedantic. And you may not care about this, but, you know, like I like to be pretty exacting. I can see here that these pixels are off black and they did not get filled with this color. And I can prove that by taking a brush. Let's take my brush tool and get it down here and actually coloring that in, and you see how they change. That's because now there is a smooth, there is flat color behind that gradient. Anyway, so that's, you know, you can do that. Like you can adjust the tolerance, and then you can actually sort of like take your brush and just, you know, brush around the places that are missed. This is a really painterly approach to doing it in Photoshop, but maybe you don't have that kind of time. Maybe this is not how you want to work. So let's, let me get rid of this, and let's try a couple of different ways to do this. So I'm going to take the tolerance back down to like, well, actually, yeah, okay. So like, I'm working in a red, green, blue color space that's good for the web. So the tolerance is only really able to go up to 255. There are reasons for that kind of get into like digital color theory that are a little bit beyond the scope of this particular, but like doing that, we have now created a situation where we have covered, you go all the way up to 255, and now there is no distinction between black and white. So 255 is the scope of the red, green, blue color gamut. So like that's what you have to work with, which is to say that I could go, if we're talking about coloring in black and white, and we only want to count everything that is black and nothing else, we can set the tolerance to 254 and color it in. And then this is what we get. So this is one of the cleanest ways to do this. But it's not a solid thing, because there, you know, what we end up with, if you want to look in this area where I've got a little bit finer line work happening. So let's zoom into the dinosaur's butt. And you can see that I've got this little triangle here and a couple of little spaces in the gap between the thigh and the belly and all of that stuff. So what do I want to do with that? Again, you can go in and take the brush tool and just brush through. That is a perfectly reasonable way to handle that. And I might just do it that way. This is not a bad approach. Yeah, what the heck. And then just brush through as I get into sort of finer details, just to make sure that I'm hitting all of that. And I might even want to just do this. Yeah. I do want to point out, if I take the selection off of that, if I go through here, this is what my flat looks like. So what I'm doing when you're doing this in comics, what I would tend to do is create a silhouette that I could then add in extra colors and shading. So this is what in comics is called flatting. So I'm adding a flat color that I am now going to manipulate. The problem is when we use the paint bucket to do our flats, I take the line drawing off of it and I still have all these gaps. So there are a couple of other ways that we can handle this. So let's get this back on. Let's select all and delete that color layer, and let's grab the magic wand tool. So we're going to deselect, we're going to grab the magic wand tool, and we're going to do it like this instead. So what I have done now is I have selected the area outside the body of the Augustenolphus. By the way, I'm really proud of myself. I have said Augustenolphus now 3 times in this, and I have not stumbled over it, and that makes me very happy. Okay, so now I have this layer selected. If I were to color it in right now, if I select inside the dinosaur, because it's outside of the selection area, nothing happens. But if I do it out here, you can now see that. So we want to reverse this. So we go up to select, and then we select inverse. You can see that is Shift Command I if you want to do it on the keyboard. And so now I have the ability to fill this entire object in. Now you can see that I'm still in this like only the front body of the dinosaur, and I actually don't want that. And so what I am going to do now is I'm going to take all layers off. So it's now no longer considering the line work layer. I'm going to just select and color that in, just like that. And what I may want to do in this case, yeah, actually I do. So once I've got this selection sort of set up, so I've used the magic wand to select the silhouette of my object. I've hit Command-Shift-I to invert the selection. So now I have actually the silhouette selected. I'm going to do one more quick adjustment to the selection. So I'm going to go up to the Select menu, and then I'm going to go to Modify, and then I'm going to select Contract. And I'm just going to, it showed up on the other monitor. Let me drag this window in here. And it says Contract Selection. And I'm going to contract it by like 2 pixels. Apply effects at canvas bounds. So the reason that I'm doing that is just to make sure that I don't end up doing any kind of bleeding outside of the line work that I've created. So I can now do that and then deselect. And now if I turn my line work layer off, you can see that I have a solid shape now of my Augustinolepis. And so if I turn that layer back on, and then I select the color layer and then alpha lock it, so now I have the ability to get a brush, and let's do a soft round pressure size brush so I can get a little bit of dithering going on in here because I want the belly area to be a little bit lighter. Let's go here, let's actually pink that up just a little bit, not that much, less than that. Yeah, sure, what the heck. And then this sort of area, this sort of underbelly area, if I start coloring this, and I just use sort of loose brushwork just to sort of like follow this line that I added in during my line art development. Go in here and usually sort of like, I'm sort of thinking in terms of like plains animals, deer, zebra, that sort of thing. They've sort of got this underbelly that runs a little bit down their legs. So I'm going to do that, color that guy in sort of like that, just rough. I'm still kind of making decisions in terms of how I want to color this. And you can now see when I turn that off, how that has started to develop. I can do this in other ways, and really there are some people who would prefer if, once you've got your sort of your flat, to then duplicate this layer. And this is going to be where the, so now I'm going to change this name from color to flats and just hang on to that and do most of my work here on color, on the actual color layer, like this. So I can go in and kind of like start doing my work. We don't, again, this is one of those things when you're doing like real, I say real, I consider myself a cartoonist. Even when I'm drawing dinosaurs, I'm not a paleo artist. That means something, I think, specific, and I want to respect, the particular expertise that goes into that. So, but like in paleo art, there's still some disagreement. There's always going to be disagreement unless we've actually got pigmentation data about like the color of these animals. And so I am just generally basing this. One of the reasons that the Augustinolepis is the California state dinosaur is because we find a lot of them out here. And so that means that I have, we know roughly what it eats. It's, an herbivore, it's a grazing animal, and you can tell that sort of by the body structure. And so like, I'm going to base my coloring of this animal on an existing animal that fills a similar ecological niche, and so that is a mule deer. So it's going to be kind of brown on top, light on bottom with this, with this coloring that runs down the legs, and a little bit of a black stripe over top. I have seen these green, I have seen them like yellow, brightly colored, like birds and that sort of thing. But really, the niche that they were filling was as a grazing creature. So that's how I would do that. But I wanted to show you different ways of thinking about how to get the coloring, because when you start the fundamentals of your drawing and then sort of rendering it out, doing that work to make sure that you're ending up with something that you can edit easily, like, because if I'm making these decisions and then I end up licensing this somewhere and they want something more colorful, I've still got flats that I can work from, and I don't have to do any of that stuff over again. I can just go in and like recolor my flats and then begin working with this. So like this is sort of a cheat way to do it. Like I had to have sort of like the duplicated flat layer. If I really wanted to like make this a deeply non-destructive and like really quick iteratable thing, I would actually create a mask layer for this and not have the brown on the layer that I'm doing most of the color work. So I would just use like a do like this. Let me select Command-Shift-I to invert it, and then select the color layer and then just do that. So what I just did when I said do that is I just selected the add vector mask. And so now what I can do is actually go through and let me select all and then delete. Whoops, wrong layer. I like that. I want to be on the color layer. I'm going to just delete all of that stuff. But now so without the flats available, I can, so now it is no longer alpha locked. So take alpha lock off and just use that vector mask. And now just with a big brush, you can see that I am still only coloring inside that silhouette that I created. So this is sort of like the, very easy, how to set this file up so that I can color it and then recolor it if I need to. So what you have here is just setting up the flats, how to use the paint bucket to get a good solid silhouette that you can then color on top, how to set up your file so that you can make, iterations and change as needed. I hope that was helpful. And, let me know if you have questions about this, if you want to try anything, or if you want me to talk about anything. You can find me at Veronica@sharptoothcreative.com. And, happy drawing.